All right, yeah, we're recording. So, all right, so I'm just gonna go through some of the stuff that we're gonna play for the concert on Friday. Um, I'll probably spend more time talking about the pieces that I know more about, which are the art songs. Not because I don't like the other pieces, but just because I don't know as much about them. Um, uh, but we're going to start with the Chaminade Concertino, which is a piece for flute and piano that was actually originally for flute and orchestra, um, written in 1902 by Cécile Chaminade, who was a student at the Paris Conservatory of Paul Taffanel, who was a well-known flute player at the time, and I've actually played some of his exercises when I studied flute a long time ago. Um, but the piece, people have a lot of speculation as to specifically what it was written for, but I think that a lot of it points to being a conservatory, like an exam piece. Like at the end of a term, you have to write something. But there are other anecdotes about its composition. But and then our next piece, we're going to kind of interrupt the flute and piano set with a piece that should technically be for orchestra and voice from Donizetti's Elixir d'Amour, Elixir of Love, which is a comic opera, comic bel canto style opera. Um, Bel canto meaning beautiful voice, and kind of showcasing the voice in that style. And it the aria comes in the end, towards the end of the show, where well, the overall plot of the story is basically this poor peasant boy uh, falls in love with this girl who is also of his same class, but she's kind of snobby because everyone's always falling in love with her. So um, there's this kind of a quack doctor who comes into town who tells him that he's going to sell him a love potion, and the love potion is actually just cheap wine. So he sells the main character cheap wine, saying that it's a love potion. So there's this great scene at the end of the first act where where what has happened is a wealthy relative of his has died, so he's inherited a large sum of money, and he doesn't know it at this point. But all of the other uh, girls in the town know it, so they're trying to like flirt with him because they want his inheritance. But he has had this cheap wine and is drunk, but he thinks that it's the love potion that's working, but it's just the inheritance, and it's a great scene. But this particular aria, una furtiva lagrime, a furtive tear, um, is when he realizes that even though everyone else likes him, she doesn't. Um, and he has decided to leave, and he's thinking about how. Well, I actually have a translation of it. Oh, where's my translation? He's basically thinking about how she was actually secretly crying, and she's going to be upset when he leaves, essentially. And it's a great aria. I would recommend listening to it, and the opera too. I think they actually had that opera up on the Metropolitan Opera broadcasts pretty recently, and they may do it again soon. And all right, and then after that, we're doing another opera-themed thing. So it's kind of a voice-themed um, program. The next piece is the Carmen Fantasy by Francois Born, who is also a flutist um, in the mid 1800s. He not really that I know of known for very much aside from this piece, um, and the piece is essentially a showpiece for the flute to show off technique and stuff like that, and it basically during that time, because there were no recordings, if you wanted to go to the opera, you either went to the opera, and if you didn't have an opera house nearby, then you had someone play parts of the opera for you. And this is kind of like it goes through different sections of the opera. You got it. The habanero section, and there's a theme and variations on that happens, which is, so you have the theme, which is the da 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 da, and then there's different variations for the flute that become increasingly more complicated. But then there's also other melodies like all of that, and of course it wouldn't be complete without that. So it's basically just the greatest hits from Carmen designed to show off the flute, essentially. Then we're kind of going away from flute and piano stuff. I'm going to do a song set. So usually with art songs, it's customary to have, a pianist and a singer, but we're trying to not bring in outside people, so I'm going to be both the pianist and the singer, which is not usually done. It is for popular music, but for some reason it never really caught on for classical music, which is in some ways I think a shame, so that's kind of also why I'm doing it too. Granted that the piano parts are more complicated, so it's a little bit more difficult to fit in. But the first song that I'm going to start with, the whole set is by pieces by Schubert. He is essentially considered the father of the art song, because these songs or lieder, he wrote over like 900 of them, so there's a lot, and these were performed at what were called Schubertiads, which was basically a soiree where everyone would come together in the parlor and read music and sing songs and stuff. It's just what people would do in place of watching TV or playing video games nowadays. So that's where a lot of these songs would have been performed. And in terms of the subject material, we have a variety of subject material. The first one it's called On Sylvia, which is to Sylvia, is what it translates to. It's actually, the text is by Shakespeare, but it was translated into German, and it's from a song. You know how in the Shakespeare plays there are things that are written as intended to be sung, but not actually with written music, so it was kind of open to interpretation what would happen with that. But this is from Two Gentlemen of Verona, and it's just the original Shakespeare. Let me just read it through. Who is Sylvia? Who is she? That all our swains command her. Holy, fair, and wise is she, that heaven such grace did lend her, that she might admired be. Is she kind, and is she fair? For beauty lives with kindness. Love doth to her eyes repair, to help him of his blindness, and, being helped, inhabits there. Then to Sylvia let us sing, that Sylvia is excelling. She excels each mortal thing, upon the dull earth dwelling. To her let us garlands bring. So it kind of has a very celebratory character to it. You have that kind of with the accompaniment. You can kind of hear that in the bass line. You kind of get that with that, and then there's also like echo patterns in the piano part, which is kind of an interesting text painting choice. I'll talk more about text painting in a second, but you have the I'll sing a little bit. I'm not sure how it'll come out in the mic, but and just pay attention to when the voice part ends, then there's an echo in the piano. Was ist Sylvia, sag it an, dass sie die weite Flur preist. Yeah, and then there's that cool echo. And this is what's called a strophic song, which, as opposed to a through-composed or free-form song, meaning that it's essentially there's one verse happens, and then there's a second verse and a third verse, and it all has the same melodic structure. All right, so the next one that I'm going to do is Stanchion, which means serenade. Let me translate that for you. Softly my song begs you through the night to you, down into the quiet grove. Darling, come to me. Whispering, slim treetops rustle in the moonlight. The hostile eavesdropper's ear will not hear. Do you hear the nightingales singing? Oh, they implore you. With the sound of sweet laments, they plead for me. They understand the pain of longing, stirring the silvery tones in every soft heart. Let them also stir them in you. Darling, listen to me. Trembling, I await you. Come, make me happy. So it's basically the image created in this song is, standing outside of the window with the guitar singing. And you actually kind of hear that in the accompaniment. It kind of sounds like a plucked string instrument, like a mandolin or guitar or something like that. And then over that, there's a very sort of free-form melodic line.
Leise fliegen meine Lieder durch die Nacht zu dir.
And this is also essentially a strophic song. When the second verse comes in, it's the same text, but then he kind of breaks it at the end, which is interesting. So instead of just
Lass mich aus dem Brust bewegen, Liebchen, höre mich, Leben fahr ich dir entgegen.
And so on and so forth. So it's kind of the climax of the song, which is so it's interesting structurally for him to kind of break the form there. The next one is the sixth song from Die Schöne Müllerin. The song cycle is basically translates to the lovely Miller's daughter, and it's about a song cycle is just essentially it's a collection of songs that just tell a story, whether loosely structured or pretty tightly structured. This song cycle actually has a pretty tightly structured story about a young traveler who finds a stream and follows the stream, and then comes to a mill and finds a miller's daughter who he falls in love with, and then she leaves him for a hunter, and then he kills himself. That was the short version of that story. But this is early on, where he has found the stream, and he's found her and decided that he's in love with her, and he's asking the stream and asking everything if he loves him. It's like the whole thing with the flower. She loves me not, she loves me. And there's a lot of cool text painting in this. And when I say text painting, I mean basically what is said in the music is shown in the piano part. So where the piano sings, or not the piano sings, where the singer sings, "Oh, Äschlein meine Liebe, oh little stream I love, why are you silent?" You hear in the piano part, you hear the stream. So you have this sort of ushing, and then that happens a lot in the song cycle, this sort of ushing melodic figures of the stream. And then over it you get the voice, and then there's also one interesting part after that part where it kind of breaks into the recitative style, which we talked about in the opera, in the context of opera. Usually it's kind of a spoken style to advance the plot, but here you get it in an art song, which doesn't really make much sense. But the text is "Ja heißt das eine Wörtchen, das andere heißt nein." It's like yes is a word and no is the other answer. So he's basically elaborating on the two answers that he could get from her. And then there's an abrupt key change when he says, "Die beiden Wörtchen schließen die ganze Welt mir ein," which essentially means these two words mean the world to me. So let me just play that part.
Ja heißt das eine Wörtchen, das andere heißet Nein. Die beiden Wäldchen schließen die ganze Welt mir ein. Die beiden Wäldchen schließen die ganze Welt mir ein.
And then we go back to the original key with a cool modulation, and so on and so forth. All right, let's go to the next one, which is what? Let me find it up here. Here we go. Schäfer's Klagelied, which is the Shepherd's Lament. It's a poem by Goethe, famous German poet. I will think that this one's worth reading the translation through. On yonder hill I have stood 1,000 times, leaning on my staff, and looking down into the valley, I have followed the grazing flocks, watched over by my dog. I have come down here, and I don't know how. The whole meadow is full of lovely flowers. I pluck them without knowing to whom I shall give them. For rain, storm, and tempest I shelter under a tree, the door that remains locked, for alas, it is all a dream. There is a rainbow above the house, but she has moved away to distant regions and beyond the sea, perhaps even beyond the sea. Move on, sheep, move on. Your shepherd is so wretched, they translate it as, but that doesn't really work, but whatever. Ist gar so weh, which is more like has so much pain. This is essentially through composed, meaning he does reference material from the beginning, but there's so many different little small sections. The opening is almost kind of a chorale type of thing.
Da droben auf jenem Berge, da steht ich 1000-mal.
And then dann folg ich der weidenden Herde, which is, and then I follow the wandering of the herd, as sort of a walking accompaniment.
Dann folg ich der weidenden Herde, mein Hündchen bewahret mir sie.
Then when he gets to the part with the flowers, about how he stands in the meadow with all the beautiful flowers, it's a very sort of playful accompaniment figure, and also a melodic figure as well. And then as the text moves on to he plucks the flowers but doesn't know who he's going to give them to, you can hear the music getting more dramatic. And then on the text, und Regen, Sturm und Gewitter, and from he's talking about, and then it rains and storms and he shelters under a tree. You can definitely hear the storm happening. So let me play just that.
Da steht dann schöne Blumen, da steht die ganze Wiese so voll. Ich brächte sie ohne zu wissen, wenn ich sie geben soll. Und Regen, Sturm und Gewitter verpass ich unter dem Baum.
So you can definitely hear that there's a storm there. And then it goes back to the opening text, or the opening music, which is kind of a return, kind of rounds it out in an interesting way. Then the next piece that we're going to do is Der Hirt auf dem Felsen, which is, because the other one's about a shepherd, this one's about a shepherd, that's why I placed it right after this. And this is actually originally written for soprano and clarinet and piano, but we're going to do it for flute, piano, and baritone. So going to be experimenting with some of the high register in this one, which will be fun. But the text of this is, there's not very much text, it's a lot of repetition. When from the highest rock up here I look down into the deep valley and sing, far from the valley and deep echoes rush through upward back at me, through the chasm. Interestingly, you can hear echoes in this because the flute echoes the voice, or the clarinet echoes the voice. The farther that my voice resounds, so much the brighter it echoes under me. My sweetheart dwells so far from me, I long wholly to be with her. And then it's structured in 3 sections. So this is the second section where you can see there's a very abrupt switch in character. I am consumed in misery. Happiness is far from me. Hope has on this earth eluded me. I am so lonesome here. So longingly did sound the song, so longingly through the wood and night, towards heaven it draws all hearts with amazing strength. Then the final section kind of cheers things up a little bit. The springtime will come, the springtime with happiness. Now I must make ready to wander. So it's basically everything is kind of reflective in the first half, then kind of depressed in the middle, and then, well, spring will come. Spring is going to come, so everything will be better at the end, which is good. One really interesting thing that I think is good to listen for in this is the echoes with the flute. So basically the voice sing. Der wiederholende Klüfte, and then the piano and the flute echo that. So we don't have Der wiederholende Klüfte, which is kind of interesting. That happens pretty frequently. And then also there's, this stereotypical thing to do when you're on a mountain in Germanic speaking areas is to yodel, and there's some of that in this too. On the text und singe, you have this, which means and sing. I'm going to go from wenn auf dem höchsten Felsigsten, which is when I'm on the highest rock and looking over into the abyss. I sing. So it's essentially standing on top of a mountain yodeling. But if you kind of picture that painting, the famous painting by Caspar David Friedrich, The Wanderer. Let me see if I can find that. The Wanderer. I can screen share. Here we go. It's trying to load. I don't need to. There we go. This painting, just standing, looking out over an abyss. You don't even see the person's face. You just see what they're looking at and the overall landscape. So then let me just play that section I was talking about with what I view as yodeling.
Wenn auf dem höchsten Fels ich steh, ins tiefe Tal herniederseh und singe.
And then there's an echo. So you hear both of those elements there. Then the second section has a very dark, broody quality, which you'll hear if you are able to make the concert. And then the last part kind of sort of ties it together and ends it on a happier note. I want to skip to the last one, which I was going to do after this, which is Schubert's An die Musik, which is, I have the translation here. I'm not going to play any of it right now, but it's basically, I think it thought it was an important one to end with because it's basically a hymn to music and praising music for bringing people through difficult times, which everyone's having a difficult time now, so it seemed appropriate. Let me just read a translation. Beloved art, in how many a bleak hour when I am enmeshed in the tumultuous round, have you kindled my heart to warmth of love and borne me away to a better world. Often a sigh escaping from your harp, a sweet celestial chord, has revealed to me heaven of happier times. Beloved art, for this I thank you. So I felt that was a good way to end the concert, and also a good way to end the talk for right now. So I'm gonna stop this. Thanks for joining.